Good afternoon, and welcome to Broadband Breakfast Live Online for Wednesday, October 23rd, 2024. Just less than 2 weeks out from a big day in America, Election Day, and we are really excited to feature a topic that I guess I would argue it has some political implications, but doesn't need to, right? We'll see how our panel takes the discussion. I'm Drew Clark, CEO and publisher of Broadband Breakfast, where we believe in better broadband, better lives. To us, that means we are a media and events community around high capacity internet, how we get it to more people, whether that's fiber or wireless or satellite, as we'll talk about today, and also the applications, the programs, the ways that people make use of better broadband connectivity. I try to do a column. It had been a month or more since I did one until yesterday, and I just highlighted two events and two tools, and I'm going to briefly just flag those here. One of the events was the one you're participating in, our weekly Broadband Breakfast Live Online event. Today will be hosted by our managing editor, Ted Hearn. It'll be about BEAD and satellites. BEAD, of course, is the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, part of the bipartisan infrastructure law that passed 3 years ago. And we're going to drill into the mechanics of satellite and alternative technologies and their use in the BEAD program. So this is one event that I'm very excited about. We have another event that I'm also very excited about that's happening on December 12th, and it's called Broadband in the Next Administration. Come January 20th, 2025, we will have a new occupant in the White House, either Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. And our event on December 12th an in-person event, will focus on the particular aspects of broadband in the next administration, issues including BEAD, issues including net neutrality, issues including the Universal Service Fund and Spectrum. Those are among the core topics we'll be addressing. And I also highlighted in my column yesterday some of the great election coverage that we've been doing at Broadband Breakfast. We have a great team of reporters, but we're very happy to partner with the Associated Press, and we're doing tech and telecom focused coverage in the lead up to the election. So I encourage you to visit broadbandbreakfast.com if you haven't recently. Lots and lots of great content available there. And we are also providing new in-depth data, including a updated chart of BEAD states and their BEAD application windows. This is available for Broadband Breakfast Club members. That's our premium service. We invite you all to be free members of the Broadband Breakfast community. And when you're ready to take the next step and become a Breakfast Club member, it's only $5.90 a year, $99 a month, or at a discount $5.90 a year. And being a part of the Broadband Breakfast community entitles you to $100 off that, so $490 for a year subscription. And we certainly hope that more and more of you will take us up on that offer. That allows you unlimited access to all the content on Broadband Breakfast, including the more than 5 stories that free readers are able to access on Broadband Breakfast. So we hope you'll take advantage of that. And speaking of our free programs, we do this Broadband Breakfast Live Online every Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern Time. Next week's event will be a preview of the December 12th in-person conference. The week after, on November 6th, we're going to be talking about the debate over unlocking phones. And the week after that, we're going to be talking about state broadband offices and BEAD awards. And we would not be able to do all of these free programs without the support of our sponsors. And I hope I'm still live. I don't know if I've cut out. I see I'm back. Our sponsors include Utopia Fiber, Comcast, Ookla, Wesco, Coos Systems, the Institute for Local Self-Reliance's Community Broadband Networks Initiative, the California Emerging Technology Fund, G-Fiber, Broadband Now, CostQuest, ACA Connects, and NCTA, the Internet and Television Association. Thank you to our regular Broadband Breakfast sponsors, as well as the sponsors of all of our in-person events. We were so excited to have Fiber Broadband Association, along with Coos, G-Fiber, and Utopia Fiber as sponsors of our recent digital infrastructure investment annual event. So thank you to each of them and to you. And it is my great pleasure now to turn the floor over to Broadband Breakfast Managing Editor, Ted Hearn. Ted is a journalist, and he has really helped us in our coverage of all manner of all things broadband. So with that, Ted, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thanks, Drew, and good afternoon, where applicable. Without further ado, let me introduce our panel. Brian Allenby, Senior Director of Program Operations, Maine Connectivity Authority. Martin Marshall, Senior Sales Engineer, Eutelsat OneWeb. Gary Bolton, President and CEO of the Fiber Broadband Association, and David Zumwalt, President and CEO of WISPA, Broadband Without Boundaries. What I'd like to do now is to ask each panelist to take about 3 or 4 minutes to give an overview on today's topic. Maine's motto is Dirigo, which means I lead or I direct in Latin. Brian, I'd like to start with you and ask you to discuss Maine's newly announced initiative to provide free Starlink terminals to certain unserved residents. In keeping with your state motto, you're leading on this issue because, to the best of my knowledge, you're the first state to embrace this approach. Go ahead.
Well, thanks so much, Ted, and thanks, Drew, for having us on. And I'm really looking forward to a great conversation with the panelists here. Before I get going, I did just try to answer Lee's question in the chat. It's not a joke. Our middle mile project is called MooseNet, and it's going to be fantastic. So middle mile, another conversation for another day. Happy to dig in and talk a bit about the Working Internet ASAP program that we just announced last week. I'm going to, if it's all right, just share a couple quick slides on it as I narrate. And, as we look at connectivity in Maine, we're really trying to do 4 things, right? We're looking at the progress that's been made. We've served over 86,000 homes, facilitating investment of $250 million through NTIA BIP, ARPA funding, state funding. So we've made some good progress. Those are 99.5% of those, all fiber projects, and fiber to those. We also have a responsibility to ensure that no one gets left behind, right? No one is left in the digital dark. And so when we look at the 1.5% of locations that are left in the state that have no access to internet of any kind, not slow DSL, not fixed wireless, when you look at the fabric, there is no technology code, and they are listed as 0 over 0. There's about 9,000 of those locations left in Maine. We also need to provide them with a solution now. We're also looking to the future, right? We're starting to look towards BEAD. We're looking at our Digital Equity Act funding. We're looking at how to continue to address those locations that have slow and unreliable internet with those funding sources, and then really equipping everybody with the tools and the skills that they need to take full advantage of that connection. And then finally, looking to the future, right? Building the infrastructure and the platform that we can use to continue to innovate. That's where MooseNet, our middle mile project, and other ongoing digital equity activities come in as well. We have a quick overview of the Working Internet ASAP program, which we just launched. I'm going to make sure, can everybody see that all right? Mm-hmm. So this is something new for me. And as Ted mentioned, I want to be really clear. I think there are other states and other provinces in Canada and other governments and other agencies that are doing this, maybe on a slightly smaller scale and maybe at a different scope. And so we don't want to take credit. We do want to lead, but don't want to take full credit for it. We are standing on the shoulders of other folks who have been doing this too. As I mentioned, we have about 1.5% of our locations left in the state that have no connection. This is a subset of about 5% of our eligible locations that will be addressed through the BEAD program. What we're doing is coordinating bulk purchase of LEO satellite hardware and service reservations to ensure capacity on the network. Starlink was selected through a competitive RFP that took place earlier this summer and into the fall. And we are fully subsidizing. We are paying for all of the hardware. We're also paying for installation, understanding that that really is a key here, is ensuring that this hardware is installed in a way to optimize the signal. And so we don't want folks to have a subpar experience simply based on that. So work through another RFP, identified 2 or 3 qualified installers who'll be working across the state, and we're covering the cost of that installation. In case somebody doesn't want to get up on the roof, we don't want anybody getting hurt. In November, we're launching an enrollment portal. So we've rolled out the program, launching an enrollment portal. It'll be map-based. Folks can type in their address. There's an existing map up on the site now. You can take a look at it. I'll put the link in the chat. That are draft locations. These are all pending final approval of our statewide challenge process data from NTIA that we're working through right now as well. Folks will work through that enrollment process, providing their basic information, confirming their address, and some basic proof of residence there. And then we'll roll them into the Starlink customer enrollment portal, and also hook them up with installers if they've opted for that. We're really understanding that these locations are some of the most remote and hardest to reach and have no connection. We're not just relying on digital marketing. We're not just relying on email or social media. We'll have a print mail campaign, working with local partners to look at like outlets in these communities where there are clusters of these locations, in-person events. We'll have a dedicated phone number, understanding that it would be a terrible irony to ask somebody to sign up online for something when they don't have an internet connection. So we'll have a phone support so folks can enroll that way as well. And then the last piece, which I think is super, super important, is that we'll be using this as an opportunity to roll out digital skills, inclusion materials, linking folks to digital equity partners in their region so that they can really ensure to take full advantage of the connection that they'll now have. And so really trying to bring it back full circle to connect them with digital navigators and our regional Wabanaki broadband partners in those areas. And I know, Ted, I'm probably coming up on time. I just wanted to show a quick view of the map. There's an interactive map online. I'll drop that in the chat. There's 3 counties, Aroostook, Penobscot, and Oxford counties in Maine, where a lot of these are focused. But it is pretty widely spread across the state. There are some other implications for BEAD. I think we could probably get into those in the discussion, but how we blend and braid and complement this program that we're launching right now ahead of BEAD with the BEAD requirements and with the BEAD program, I'm hoping that we can chat about, because I think that's some of the areas we're still learning and we'll need to lean into in the coming months.
Great, Brian, thank you so much. Quick question for you. Free shipping, or is that not really material because there'll be free installation and that person will bring the dish at that time?
I believe it's free shipping. We're confirming exactly how those portals will work and exactly what that looks like.
Great, thank you. Martin, after you.
All right. Thanks. Yeah, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here and to kind of have a discussion with everyone this morning. I'm with Eutelsat OneWeb. We are a LEO and GEO satellite service provider. Specifically, the OneWeb side of the company, we launched services back at the end of 2021 and have been providing LEO-based high bandwidth, low latency services across the globe. As was said during the introductions, I'm based up here in Alaska, and LEO and the services that we've been providing have been a huge impact. And as Brian was just talking about in Maine, there are large portions of the population who simply don't have connectivity today. And that's a key portion of, I think, what we'll be able to discuss today during our conversation here is the impact of alternative connection technologies and the way they can help some of these remote communities or remote individuals, right, who just aren't on a connection path today, or maybe fiber is just something that's not going to work out well for them, at least in the near term, right? How can we provide connectivity to them? And that was really one of the foundational elements of OneWeb and our launch and our focus of connecting the unconnected, so to speak. But we designed our network and our services to focus in on providing services to those types of communities, to those types of customers. And we're kind of unique in the fact that we aren't an ISP. We don't provide connectivity to the internet. What we do is we actually work through a distribution partner network. Some of them are local telcos, some of them are national telcos. They have that infrastructure, they've got those capabilities that are already in place. And what we do is we provide the ability to extend those services out to these remote locations via a satellite network and provide those services. Again, high bandwidth, low latency. And it's been great. We've seen the impact of that up here in Alaska over the last several years, being able to go out into communities who had little to no connectivity in the past, and be able to provide them high bandwidth, low latency connectivity. Simple things like being able to do what we're doing right now, jumping on a Zoom meeting, right? Having real-time communications, whether that be for a school type environment for young kids or people looking for adult education, getting, some sort of degree or certifications online, to simple things like FaceTiming with family, things that they were never ever able to do before. We've been able to go out to these communities and help design and put together a plan for connectivity in those communities. And it's been really great through the BEAD process over the last year or so. I spent a lot of time going out and meeting with different state broadband boards who are focused on the BEAD program, implementing that, and just education around what is available outside of the traditional fiber, right? Fiber is what we always want to look towards because it's one of the best available technologies we've got today. But understanding the realities that we face, whether it be geography or other limitations that we have when it comes to deploying fiber out there, what are some viable alternatives for the near term, but also for the long term? One of the things that we've seen a lot up here in Alaska with these remote communities is even if we were able to get fiber out there, they're typically single run fibers and there's no resiliency built in, there's no redundancy. So what do we do if we provide connectivity and then all of a sudden that fiber gets cut? And it could be months, if not longer, of getting that repaired. So how do we make sure that we maintain this access once we're able to deliver it out there? And I think that's a key thing that we need to think about as well when we're looking at BEAD, when we're looking at overall connectivity and providing access. We need to look holistically about these solutions and being able to kind of maintain them. And it's been really great. I mean, from the BEAD perspective and the state broadband perspective, we've worked closely. For example, one of our partners is AT&T. They're actually doing a demonstration today with the state of Pennsylvania broadband group and showing them the OneWeb services, how it integrates in, how they're able to provide connectivity out to these communities, and just ways of applying satellite connectivity as a whole to help leverage some of these funds and provide connectivity that's out there. So again, I'll kind of stop there and toss it back over to you, Ted. And again, stating I'm looking forward to some good conversations today.
Thank you, Martin. Gary Bolton.
Good morning, everyone. As we build out our nation's critical broadband infrastructure, we need to consider what the future will bring. Examples of that future we're already starting to see with the acceleration of artificial intelligence and machine learning. For half a century, Moore's law has held true that compute power will double every 24 months while costs are cut in half. As we enter the artificial intelligence era, we're already seeing a very distinct market discontinuity where compute power now is doubling every 6 months as costs are cut in half. Matter of fact, 7 of the world's most valuable companies are now AI chip companies led by NVIDIA. So we are on the cusp, also on the cusp of the quantum era, as quantum computing and quantum networks will accelerate innovation and market disruption. And this will happen within the next 3 years. The same can be said about metaverse applications, and we can go on. In short, I cannot overemphasize the importance on building out our nation's critical broadband infrastructure to be reliable, scalable, future-proof, resilient, and sustainable. Sustainable, as we need our industry to be on a near-term path to zero carbon footprint, an effort to reverse the damage to our environment that has been done during the industrial age. None of this happens without fiber. As Drew mentioned, we are less than 2 weeks out from the election, and the politics have gotten very thick in Washington. And unfortunately, NTIB, the Broadband Infrastructure Program, has become a target for some of the political rhetoric. And I encourage you to remind your congressional representatives that the bipartisan infrastructure law is bipartisan. NTI, led by Assistant Secretary Alan Davidson, has done a phenomenal job and has been ahead of schedule on everything that's within their control. NTI delivered the BEAD Notice of Funding Opportunity ahead of the schedule. All 56 states and territories are participating in the program. No small feat. They're getting everybody on board. All 56 states and territories have set up state broadband offices and delivered their initial proposals to NTI ahead of deadline. NTI staffed field reps across the country, and NTI has now approved 55 of the 56 initial proposals, and the final state approvals will be coming in the next few weeks. So you can argue that the distribution of funding was flawed, as some states have hundreds of millions of dollars left over for non-deployment, while other states, mostly the big square states, came up short. But that's a function of the FCC maps that NTI was required to use by statute. Further, NTI continues to hold firm on its fiber preference, using a technology waterfall model that gets fiber to every location possible before considering fixed wireless projects and other technologies. As we're building out our nation's critical infrastructure, fiber delivers on long-lasting performance, reliability, resiliency, and sustainability that will elevate the quality of life for generations to come. So, as we are so close to realizing Congress' vision for connecting every American, we need to hold the line and not get distraction. Our nation's future is at stake. NTI recently issued this proposed guidance on alternative technologies and solicited comments. This exercise in no way alters NTI's priority on fiber projects or its position that LEO satellites and unlicensed wireless are unreliable broadband. The Fiber Broadband Association submitted comments in this proceeding, and we believe that NTI's technology waterfall approach with fiber first and fixed wireless access followed by other reliable broadband technologies is working. And before you get to the next step in the waterfall, to ensure that no locations left behind, we're suggesting that NTI allow states to disaggregate locations in unbid serving areas to be able to see if there's any takers to be able to get fiber to any of those, even disaggregate to a single location to get fiber to every possible location, and then do the same thing with what's left over with fixed wireless and on down the technology waterfall. So let's get everyone connected with fiber where possible before moving to the next technology, and leave no stone unturned to get fiber to these served, unserved, and underserved areas. And regardless of what coverage Starlink may provide, it's still unreliable broadband technology, and we cannot leave any American family behind by taking their location off the table for the convenience of a state broadband office to check a box to claim it's served. Consider if the FCC had not rescinded the RDOF award to Starlink, that would have resulted in 640,000 American families not being eligible for BEAD funding. NTI has correctly classified LEO satellite technology as unreliable because the technology has limitations. NTI has made the right call. We need to hold the line. So I look forward to this discussion. So thank you, guys.
Thanks, Gary. David Zumwalt.
Good day, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm the president and CEO of WISPA, and WISPA historically has been an advocate for the wireless ISP community. But if you actually look at the hometown ISPs that form our membership, they're everything from 250 and less subscribers over to well over 100,000, and they're deploying every technology, including fiber. So really the only disagreement that I have with Gary's point, maybe one of the only ones, is where does fiber belong? Of course it belongs to the networks. But in fact, NTIA has not said anything about a technology being unreliable. What they've instead done is they've taken the technology neutral thrust of the Infrastructure Act from 2021 and included in a definition that they call reliable broadband service, a defined term, certain preferred technologies for funding. But anybody who's worked with wireless knows that it's fundamentally reliable, and it's a faster way to get people covered too. if we're going to be trying to use the available funds to provide fiber at every location, we're going to be at least 10 years out and a lot more expensive than we're looking at today. So when we look at people who are wanting coverage today and needing coverage today, it really does need to be an all technology approach. And I think that that's what NTIA is now recognizing, that NTIA has a limited amount of money. They also, frankly, have a limited amount of time. So how can all technologies achieve the goal of universal connectivity as soon as possible? And that's what WISPA supports. We have 4 key areas that we support within our organization. These are policy pillars, if you will. We're in favor of balanced spectrum allocation to ensure small and rural providers have a fair shot at accessing critical spectrum. We're also in favor of targeted subsidy programs that prioritize broadband deployment to truly unserved locations in a technology neutral manner, including fiber. We're in favor of keeping small businesses competitive by lowering all regulatory burdens. And we're in favor of fast and fair access to infrastructure for broadband deployments, no matter the location. One of the other things I would share with you before going further is that for several years, I was chief operating officer of a WISP, about 9,000 subscribers, and we had a good mix of residential, business, enterprise, academic, and government customers. And I know from running that WISP and getting to know the WISPA members that they really are using every technology to deploy. So to say that one technology fits all is not what's being represented across the broad universe of ISPs and WISPs that are out there today. So I think that NTIA has an opportunity to come into closer alignment with certainly the letter and intent of the Infrastructure Act, but more importantly, to come into alignment with the companies that have actually been doing it in the digital divide for a while, to make sure that future needs can be taken care of, but that broadband deployment can happen now in an economically sensible manner so that everyone can get connected. Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to turn now to a question about affordability. Brian, can you explain why the state decided to provide free dishes, free Starlink terminals, rather than requiring some sort of contribution by recipients, so they had skin in the game? There's that, and I'd also be interested to know. It seems like you have some sort of bulk negotiation going on with Starlink to bring down the rack rate of $5.99 to something less than that, and so I was curious about that. And the other part is affordability. To the best of my knowledge, Starlink is $120 a month. Are you concerned about whether the program will be effective with connecting people if there's an affordability issue with $120 a month?
Great questions, Ted, and I don't want to miss the opportunity to call out the irony of me losing my internet connection while we're in the middle of a panel talking about the internet. But so if y'all can't hear me or can't see me all right, just please do shout. I think affordability is a key. It's a key provision of all MCA programming, and it is a key concern of us, right? We know that more people don't connect to the internet in Maine, and I believe nationally, because of they can't afford it, rather than the fact that they don't have access to it, right? So like that is at the core of what we do across all of our programs. For this particular program, when it comes to subsidizing the hardware, that is done for several reasons. One is looking at overall program budget. The other is that's consistent with all of MCA programs, whether we're dropping fiber, whether it's a fixed wireless connection, or whether it's LEO. The role of MCA is getting that connection to a home or business. It is the subscribers, their relationship with the given provider. And so that is how this program is structured. I will say we are understanding that affordability is, again, an issue across all of our programs, looking at other ways, other potential partnerships with partners around the state to understand what our options are, right? So it's not we don't want to conflate too many elements into a given program right now. Our priority was to get this launched, get this out there, let folks have the option to connect. We are looking at what we could set up with others around affordability very quickly. It gets into things like income eligibility checking, which starts to open up a lot of questions about kind of the mechanics, who's handling it, and that sort of thing. So I think we're trying to think through some of those items, especially in the wake of the ACP and any sort of national verification system, as to how we can, as a state, can best support on that through the WIA program, but also through our other programs as well.
And hey, Ted, if I could chime in, and Brian, just to make sure that there's no confusion. So all those 9,000 locations are still on the map. They're still considered unserved. All you're doing is trying to offer a Band-Aid to try to help some people get connected to some level of best effort until you're able to deploy your BEAD program and serve those communities through the NTI program.
That's a really important point, Gary, and I really appreciate you bringing it up. And it's one I have on my list to mention. Exactly right. So these 9,000 are a subset of our BEAD locations. We are not taking them off the BEAD map, right? In fact, we would love to get fiber to as many of those locations as we can. Understanding, even if they were to receive a fiber award through BEAD, it's going to be a couple of years, right? I mean, if we're looking at BEAD deployment, final proposal next spring, we get through permitting, we get through contracting, we get through build. What we're trying to do now is provide those folks with an option to connect. So we're not taking them off the map for BEAD. They're still on there. Any technology could apply for them, right? Throughout the waterfall you described. We're trying to get folks that option to connect. Now, where some interesting mechanics come in is if the ultimate solution through BEAD is a similar or the same LEO solution, how do we back it in there, right? To minimize duplicative funding through from BEAD for this program. That is things that we're still working through, and I think really pending the release of the final alternative technology guidance from NTIA.
Yeah, because the real big challenge here is, I think Ted nailed it on affordability, because, anywhere in the country, if someone wants a LEO satellite, whether in Alaska or wherever they are, they can go to Home Depot, pay $500, get their satellite dish, and pay their $120 a month. So what Maine's doing is they're giving everybody, these 9,000 people, $500 worth of equipment to help them get started, but they still are stuck with the $120 a month. So if they don't have $500, they probably don't have $120 a month. So it's still very challenging to make sure that we can get not only people connected, but make sure they can afford the service, as Brian indicated, because, these rural communities are the people who need it most.
Brian, explain to me, how can you keep them on the BEAD map if they have a Starlink dish? Couldn't someone at NTIA say, it's one or the other, but not both?
Well, and this again, I think there's probably folks on here who have an even better understanding of that alternative technology guidance than I do. But NTIA really laid out 3 options for how we would look at taking locations off the BEAD map as part of our final proposal, as it related to alternative technologies. And when I say alternative technologies, I think generally what we're talking about is LEO and unlicensed fixed wireless, are what NTIA is classifying as alternative. There would need to be a process. NTIA has started to document potentially what it would look like and what we would need to demonstrate, say we wanted to take locations off the BEAD map because they were currently served by Starlink. We don't have the final definition of exactly what that looks like. To my knowledge, that is still an option that each state has. NTIA is not saying you have to take them off if they have Starlink service or service through an existing program. So clarifying, we are waiting for them to clarify exactly what does the definition of that enforceable commitment look like. I don't know when that will come. Certainly our BEAD subgrantee selection process will likely happen ahead of any final decision on that. So what we're looking at is trying to solicit proposals, as many proposals from providers of all types, fiber, fixed wireless, LEO, for those project areas, to see what we have.
David or Martin?
Yeah, I think the affordability, sorry, David, the affordability is key. You know, what we've seen here in Alaska, and we're not unique from that perspective, is the cost, right? BEAD is great, and it's designed for this initial capital outlay of getting services out there. But what does that mean in the long run? And a lot of these communities, yes, you know, we'll use the Starlink example that you brought up, Gary, right? Yeah, you can go to Home Depot or Costco and drop $500 for a Starlink terminal. You know, we've got some great subsidies with the plan with Maine, but there's still that monthly service of $120 a month for this. And in a lot of these remote communities, that is a massive portion of their income. And, you know, BEAD is not addressing that long-term, you know, cost that's associated with it. And what we've seen is a lot of these terminals, they get purchased, they use that service, the service gets disconnected because they're not able to afford it in the long run. And then the terminals are just sitting there. And we need to think as a whole, beyond this initial BEAD funding, what we can do to maintain these connections for these community members, right? These residents. And that needs to be taken into account, whether it's LEO, whether it's fiber, whether it's some other fixed wireless solution. That needs to be a key portion that we need to be talking about and putting plans together for.
Good. Oh, okay. Gary, I wanted to ask you, I guess you're citing NTIA language, but how can you say Starlink is unreliable technology? I don't know about you, but I've seen people using Starlink on a Hawaiian Airlines flight from Long Beach, California to Honolulu, cruise ships, and of course the Ukrainian military is relying on Starlink to hold the Russian military at bay as best it can. Why do you use that language? It's an unreliable technology when it seems like there's a lot of evidence to say it's not.
Yeah, that's defined by NTIA as unreliable. And so why that's so critically important, Ted, is that we're talking about each one of these locations is a family. It's people's lives. And we do not want those taking off the map. You know, just as Brian indicated, in Maine, they are not taking these locations off the map because we need to be able to get a reliable broadband service to every of these communities. If you think about today, the average fiber to the home is delivering 10 gig by 10 gig symmetric service. And in many communities now, it's 25 gig service. And we just saw a couple weeks ago that in the tribal areas in Oklahoma, they launched the world's first 50 gig symmetric fiber service. And so we're going to be into the hundreds of gigs, terabits. And as I started off in my opening remarks, you know, it's critical for the quantum future. It's critical for the artificial intelligence future, metaverse, whatever is coming down the line. We are right at the beginning, at the cusp of all this innovation. And what we don't want to do is create another quantum divide or create an artificial intelligence divide. We want to make sure that every community is not left behind. Matter of fact, we just had a study with Corey that looked at if you have fiber in your community and you have people that actually adopt it and are getting served by it, that'll increase that GDP by 44% and deliver 18% increase in income per capita. I mean, these are huge numbers for rural America. So it's critical that you know, we don't punt and just say, okay, these locations are hard to reach, so we're just going to saddle them with something that's unreliable. If you think about what's the issue with LEO satellites is that what you don't want to do with any federal subsidy is to spend money. The whole definition of federal subsidy is to get the private sector to do something they wouldn't do normally. Well, Elon Musk has 10 times more money than all the BEAD money combined, right? He has 100 times more money than Texas is going to get with the BEAD program. So there's no amount of money that government can give Elon Musk that's going to alter the pace of number of satellites, because his goal is to colonize Mars. And so he's, you know, the Falcon 9 and Starship, these are an ends to mean to be able to, he's throwing satellites in here to create cash flow to be able to reduce his cost per kilogram. So the Falcon 9's already reduced the cost per kilogram by tenfold. The Starship's going to reduce it by another tenfold. This is all an effort to colonize Mars. This is not an effort to get every American connected with reliable broadband. Starlink is a beta service, and it'll all be a beta service. So
thanks, Gary. Okay,
I won't go any further. I'll let you move on, but you get me going. You'll get me going.
I wanted this conversation to become interplanetary, but I thought we'd just kind of stick to
those aren't my words. Those are his words.
Okay.
And Ted, but before we move on, do you mind if I take 30 seconds? Because I wanted to kind of address a point that Gary made there, specifically with, fiber and the reference to LEO being unreliable. And, from a real world example, Gary, and, others on here, I said earlier that, hey, fiber is something we should be working towards, right? It's one of the best options that we've got available today, but it is not impervious, right? It is not perfect. There are other issues that exist with any type of connectivity that's out there. And perfect examples, right? Again, I'm in Alaska. We've got some very remote communities. We've had, just in the last 18 months, 3 massive fiber cuts that have impacted extremely large portions of the state, right? And because of the way the fiber is run out to these locations, like I mentioned, it's not redundant. There aren't multiple paths. These are single runs that are out there. And these are single runs impacting huge populations of people, right, in remote places. An example that we had just a few weeks ago up here, an entire island community was cut off because of a fiber cut, right? The entire community runs off of fiber. We're talking voice services, we're talking data services, we're talking cellular services. Everything was completely dead in the water.
Marshall,
and if it wasn't for LEO services getting in there and providing backup connectivity, they would have been down for multiple weeks at a time. And so when we look at reliable, unreliable, whatever category you want to throw in it, we need to look at redundant solutions, because one solution isn't going to provide you 100% service availability, whether it's fiber or whether it's satellite or whether it's wireless, right?
Right. Marshall, great example. The first one you were referring to was the ice scour up in Nome, right? That took out fiber. That was last summer, and that was 14 weeks. And I, for Broadband Breakfast, covered as best we could the Sitka event, where there was a fiber break off the coast of Sitka, and they lost internet for 2 weeks, which prompted one DC policy analyst to say fiber might be future proof, but it's not Alaska proof. And in terms of devastation, hurricanes are technology neutral, but satellite seems to be exempt. I just want to give, this is totally anecdotal, but after GCI's network came back and they fixed the fiber break in Sitka, I Googled Sitka grocery stores and I called the first 3 to see if the GCI network was back up and running, just to see if everything was cool. And the first 3 I called said, well, we have Starlink. Anyway, Gary, I digress there. Does anybody else on the panel? I wanted to. Anyone else on the panel have a thought?
I just wanted to. Echo. I think our priority is getting a fiber connection to everybody. But as Martin was saying, we face topographic challenges in doing that, and we don't have unlimited funds. And so, one of the tools that we're going to deploy is, when we're looking at our extremely high cost per location threshold through BEAD, we're doing that on a project service area by project service area basis, right? So we can really try to strategically maximize the amount of fiber that's out there, understanding that some of these locations will, the most cost-effective way to serve the greatest number of people in a state will be incorporating alternative technologies. And as we continue to look at, fixed wireless deployments that are happening around the state and some of the projects that we've supported there, I think it provides a great opportunity. And that resiliency and redundancy, it's why we're building a $50 million middle mile project here too, right? To provide additional resiliency and redundancy for the backbone and the connectivity needs of our entire state. So I think so we really don't view these as mutually exclusive. We view them as complementary. And so again, with WIA, we're trying to get ahead of some of that without precluding fiber solution there, but are very much looking at them as complementary tools in the toolkit.
Now, Brian brings up an excellent point, and thanks for bringing that, Brian, because when you think about getting fiber to every American, you're building out that critical infrastructure, and so that's called the middle mile part of this. And every road that you bring fiber down, that also enables to improve our wireless infrastructure, improve everything that we have. Whether it's public service, or public safety, or our smart grid modernization, and so forth. And when you think about BEAD money, while 42 billion sounds like a lot of money, it's really only targeting less than 9 million Americans. And so the other 130 million locations that are being served with fiber, those are all being served with private CapEx. So the amount of private CapEx significantly dwarfs the amount of money that we're investing in BEAD. But why BEAD is so critically important is that it does enable us to help spur more private investment. So as we're getting fiber to these really hard to reach places, that opens up the ability to layer that on with private investment to get to areas that aren't unserved or underserved. And so it really is that's what's fueling the largest investment cycle in fiber in history.
Interesting.
So Ted, I've been a little quiet here. Could I get
Sure, go ahead, David.
All right. At Mountain Connect, we had a panel that Gary and I served on that was intentionally pitched as a debate for technologies. And I know that's part of what we're doing here, but at WISPA's WISPApalooza show, which was just last week, our closing keynote was a panel not pitched as a debate, but instead it was a discussion of operators of all the different technologies that are there. We had a fiber ISP, we had a wireless ISP, we had a distributor, we had sort of the same format of what we had done at Mountain Connect, but just demonstrating how when you engage all technologies, you get faster, better service to everyone. And I think that's sort of the spirit and the intent of what we're talking about here today. What Maine is doing is incredible. What Alaska is doing is incredible. And we can't approach these opportunities, whether we're talking about those states or others, with an eye that only one technology is going to go get it done. And I'll come back to what I said earlier. Gary keeps using the term unreliable. That doesn't show up anywhere other than to include DSL in reliable technology or reliable broadband service technology. And I don't think any of us would agree that DSL has a future, even in the BEAD program.
Interesting. I had the state of Oklahoma did a big expenditure, a grant program in January, and I asked them to send me the Excel doc and file, and I saw some per location costs there of $145,000 per location. And I used to joke that I wonder if it would be cheaper to move people to broadband than to move broadband to the people at some of these per location costs. Gary, what I wanted to ask you is, do you have like a sequencing problem here that Maine is interrupting the waterfall, and that I guess my question for you is, are you expecting these people to wait, and that the state shouldn't try this Starlink solution now, and that your preference is them to wait for a year or two or more to get fiber?
No, so just make sure that we're very clear. I applaud Maine's efforts to try to make sure that everybody is connected as soon as possible. What I also applaud Maine's not taking these locations off the map. That is the most critical thing, is to not do anything that's going to endanger these locations from being able to get fiber in the future. And so just like we saw with, I mentioned the RDOF, if those 640,000 locations had been awarded to Starlink, then they would not be eligible for any of this, historic investment. And so what Maine's done is they're saying, hey, we need a stopgap, and we're going to do whatever we can to try to make sure that these 9,000 people have something. That's totally different than taking them off the map and not and make them eligible for fiber or a reliable broadband solution in the future. So again, there's a number of reasons why you don't want to take people off the map. First of all is, as I mentioned, the future of technology. But second, just think about NTI's, everything that they've done on like Build America, Buy America, being able to, the billions of dollars that are being invested in the US today because of this program. All the major manufacturers have moved manufacturing into America to be able to be invest in this program. And now you're going to open the door to let someone that's going to not be compliant to all the requirements of the NTI's program. I don't think that would make any sense. That would blow up everything that has been accomplished over the last 3 years.
Got it.
And
Got
so
it.
that's
Thanks.
why it's so important to continue to hold the line as we're so close to now getting into deployment and be able to really realize the vision that's been set forth.
Mhm. Brian, any thoughts on that?
No, I appreciate that context and that lens, Gary, and I think we agree, and when it comes to performance standards, I'll be very clear, like the agreement that we're working on will ensure performance standards that would meet BEAD and other, so 100 over 20, 100 milliseconds. Like, we are not building a program that would provide subpar service and then backing into that. What we are doing is trying to build the Working Internet ASAP program now to get to those performance standards so that they're in alignment with BEAD and other program requirements. So that is very much the lens that we're looking at it through. We don't want to further perpetuate the digital divide, right? By creating more classes of users. And so that is a key part of it. And frankly, is a key part of what the state is funding in those reservations is the insurance of those performance standards and that capacity on the network.
Let me toss this one in because we just got about 8 minutes left. Terrestrial ISPs go into NTIA and say, "Don't you dare use BEAD money to overbuild our networks." Why? It's a waste of money, and it takes money away to serve locations that don't have internet. There's 7. I think FCC says that the map says there's 7 million unserved locations in the U.S. My question is BEAD a government-funded overbuild program of Starlink, which in theory is available to all 7 million of those unserved locations?
Let me change the way you phrase that. If you recognize a single location is served by Starlink, then you say basically everybody's served by Starlink. And so we could kill the entire BEAD program today based on that. And that totally destroys everything that Congress was trying to achieve by making sure that every American is connected. And that's why it's so important that we can never be able to allow that to happen. We can never take locations off the map.
Got it. David Zumwalt, you look like you want to jump in.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of aligned with Gary on this, but I think we end up at different destinations, and here's why. I think the BEAD program provides a lot of money to push important infrastructure out where it's not been feasible to make the private investment before to go and do it. So I like that. But the overarching concern of BEAD is to serve the unserved, to make sure we get to a point where we have full connectivity. And so if you look at the games that have been played about, well, what are the broadband speeds? Are they symmetric? Are they not? These are all kind of case studies in how to get an existing large ISP to use government money to build out beyond the edge of their existing network and still leave people unserved. We have states that are coming back now saying, we just don't think we can do this with the money that we've been given. And we're just not going to be able to get universal coverage. Well, of course you can if you approach it from a different way. If we're going to go down a road that says, no, we're going to focus on a technology that is going to be investable for whatever reason, call it optical fiber, and we're going to go as far as we can, whatever's left over might be for a future funding project. No, that doesn't make sense. If the priority is for us to serve the unserved, then let's go serve the unserved. If Starlink can do it, serve the unserved. If fiber can do it, and it certainly can, serve the unserved. There are ways to get it done in a short period of time if we take an all technology approach, which is exactly what the IIJA said.
Interesting.
Hey, Brian, just real quick, I
Brian or
just
Martin?
wanted to, for David's edification, Jordan Gross put in the definition of reliable broadband from the NOFO, so that if you want to look up that helps you.
Oh, I know that. You're using the term unreliable, and that's not been said anywhere. And in fact, when we asked NTIA why they excluded unlicensed wireless, they said that they were concerned about its future availability, and the FCC promptly opened up the 6 gigahertz band. I don't think that there's a future availability issue. NTIA has not spoken on technology prowess at all. You're using the term unreliable because it favors the fiber-only argument. We love fiber too. We've got a lot of fiber running through the networks of our members. We do. But
I took that term from Evan Feynman. So if you look at his blog post on alternative technology, he defines unreliable broadband as.
And Evan's important, but is Evan responsible for the language in the NOFO? Is he speaking for NTIA? Is he aligning
the director of
what the IIJA says?
Okay.
You're using unreliable.
Okay, reclaiming my time. One question I wanted to ask is, a BEAD was passed by the IIJA almost 3 years ago. And when I kind of, do my back of the envelope math, when you take into account inflation, interest rates, supply chain issues, and a 21% corporate tax, I peg the BEAD program at more like a $33 billion program. My question is, do you share that perspective, and do you think the program is going to run out of money and not fulfill its goals?
I'm not an economist, so I couldn't speak to the number you threw out there, right? I think we can all agree that because of inflation, because of the fact that it's taxable for ISPs. I mean, this is not. We'd love for that not to be the case. It isn't how the IRS works right now. So I don't want to go too far down that path. So I think certainly, is it worth less than $42.5 billion? Yeah, it is. I think one of the challenges that I've seen, and especially in talking with other states, is that, somebody mentioned the big rectangular square states earlier. Mm-hmm. Those big Western states are in such a different position than we are in the East, right? And I actually, I'm on the SBLN planning group, and I actually suggested that we start breaking out these cohorts, because I can talk to Christine in Vermont and Matt in New Hampshire and have a conversation about New England states, and we're generally-ish, right, have similar densities, have similar cost per passings, have similar economics and allocations. It's a whole other conversation than when you're talking with Brian Mitchell and the folks in Arizona and those states in Colorado. Mm. So I think what's hard is that those dollars, even if you set the value of the dollar lower, how those dollars manifest in the States is also very, very different. And so it's a bit of an apples and oranges comparison in a lot of ways.
Gotcha. We just have about 2 minutes left. And I wanted to say that I was shocked to read that the head of the North Dakota broadband office said he does not believe that his office will receive any applications for BEAD grants. Kind of amazing. Gary, I just wanted to push back on you just quickly, and that is, Amazon is going to plow $10 billion into Project Kuiper to launch 3,200 satellites to compete with Musk. I'm just wondering, do you think the Amazon team would make that kind of investment in an unreliable technology?
Again, this has nothing to do with broadband connectivity. These guys are trying to colonize Mars. This is a whole different. This is a means. No, this
is Amazon, not Bezos's Blue Origin. This is Kuiper, not Blue Origin, right, which is Bezos's personal thing.
Right. So again, this is space travel. So this is great for the future of humanity, okay, and so forth. But okay, what we're talking about today is really elevating the quality of life for generations to come, and be able to eliminate low income and be able to provide everybody an even playing field. And I think the work, I applaud Brian and the work that his team is doing and his colleagues across the country on their efforts to get everybody connected. This is
Thank you. Gary, thank you. We've reached the end of the hour, and I'd like to thank our panelists for their time today. Hope to see you next week.
Thanks so much for having us on.
Thanks, Ted. A lot of fun. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank
Have a
you.
good one.
Covered a lot of ground. Thank you, guys.